Good morning. Hard line. In his first speech to the United Nations General Assembly, President Obama will tell the global community they cannot stand by and wait for the U.S. to solve the world's problems. We're live at the UN. And live in our studio, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Not even a scratch. A 6-year-old girl walking in front of a convenience store when a car comes out of nowhere and nearly crushes her this morning. How she got away injury-free. And wait, there's more. On Tuesday, we introduced you to these 3 long-lost siblings who just found each other after nearly 40 years. Well, guess who called us? Yet another sister. They'll all meet for the first time live in our studio today, Wednesday, September 23rd, 2009.
From NBC News, this is Today with Matt Lauer and Meredith Vieira. Live from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
And good morning. Welcome to Today on a Wednesday morning. I'm Matt Lauer.
And I'm Meredith Vieira. You know, Matt, people around the world are going to be listening very closely today to what the president says in that major speech at the UN.
They certainly will be. The president plans to say that the size and the scope of the world's challenges are not being met. This a day after he delivered a stern message to Israel and Palestinian leaders telling them it is past time to talk about starting negotiations when it comes to the Mideast peace process. We're going to talk about that in a live interview with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in just a couple of minutes.
And also ahead, the other side to that emotional embryo mix-up. On Monday, we met an Ohio couple, the wife pregnant with someone else's baby after doctors accidentally implanted her with another couple's embryo. Well, this morning, that other couple, the genetic parents of that unborn child, they are with us for an exclusive live interview.
But we want to begin this morning with the president's first speech to the UN's General Assembly. NBC's chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell, is joining us now from the United Nations. Andrea, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt. The president will be calling for international cooperation on nuclear proliferation, on the Middle East, and on global warming and climate change. And he'll also outline his economic priorities in advance of the G20, tomorrow's gathering of financial leaders in Pittsburgh.
Ahead of today's UN meeting, awkward handshakes, as a clearly impatient Barack Obama delivered a tough message to Israeli and Palestinian leaders. Stop arguing and start negotiating.
It is past time to talk about starting negotiations. It is time to move forward.
The two sides are deadlocked. Palestinians demanding a complete freeze on Israeli settlements before talks can begin. Israel offering only a partial freeze. And the U.S. and Israel have to deal with Iran. Before leaving for New York and the UN, Iran's controversial President Ahmadinejad ratcheted up his threats. Another setback for U.S. diplomacy.
This, in some way, may be a serious effort on his part somehow to block the initiatives the president has taken to try to open the conversations with Iran.
But Israel will not wait forever for diplomacy to work. At the Pentagon Monday, Israel's defense minister would not rule out military action against suspected Iranian nuclear sites, despite warnings from the U.S.
If they take military action, it can have profound consequences for U.S. national security interests.
The president is also on the spot on climate change. Blocked by the Senate, he is promising far less than during the campaign.
We understand the gravity of the climate threat. We are determined to act.
But he didn't make specific commitments, nor did the world's largest polluter, China, although it did promise greener development. And UN traffic jams delayed the president's arrival at Bill Clinton's global initiative, forcing Clinton to vamp for 10 minutes.
And even presidents face traffic problems in Manhattan at this time of year.
When the president finally arrived, he explained how Clinton had gotten him to come in the first place, over pasta at a restaurant in Greenwich Village.
I think everyone knows what it's like when Bill Clinton asks you to make a commitment. He looks you in the eye. He feels your pain.
Now in New York, the Iranian leader says that he will ask for leniency for those 3 American hikers being held prisoner in Tehran. But only a few days ago, he told Ann Curry that he wanted Iranian prisoners released in exchange. So the question for U.S. officials today is which Ahmadinejad will show up when he addresses the General Assembly tonight. Matt?
All right, Andrea, thank you very much. Andrea Mitchell at the United Nations this morning. Benjamin Netanyahu is the Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Prime Minister, it's good to have you here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me put that picture right back up, okay? The handshake between you and Mr. Abbas. Does it mean anything? Does it show any sign of progress, or is that a long overdue photo op?
Well, I think it's long overdue, and I don't think it's just a photo op. I mean, I've been, since being installed as Prime Minister, which is about 6 months ago, I said, let's meet and let's talk peace. Let's not talk about talking peace. Let's just get together and do it. And I'm glad that President Obama hosted this meeting. And I think with the goodwill from all sides, we can get this thing going.
But where do we stand? I mean, the president, you're saying the right things. President Obama's saying the right things. He says it's the time to act. There's a window of opportunity. He's going to send Hillary Clinton and George Mitchell back to the Middle East and try and build on this progress. But the fact of the matter is George Mitchell just returned from the Middle East and accomplished almost nothing. He didn't get the Palestinians to agree to negotiate without preconditions. He didn't get you to agree to dropping your insistence there could be no freeze of settlements. So where do we stand? What progress can we build on?
I think the crucial thing is preconditions. We can all pile on preconditions from here to infinity, and we'll waste another 6 months or another 6 years. I think the main point is to do exactly what we began doing yesterday, to get into a room and say, look, how do we get a real peace between Israel and the Palestinians? Why don't we resolve our problems so we can give our children a better future? Now, mind you, I haven't waited. We've been 6 months in office. We've removed hundreds of roadblocks, checkpoints, opened the Allenby Bridge so goods and services and people can come back and forth into the West Bank. The results are spectacular. The West Bank economy, according to the IMF, is growing at 7%. If we meet and talk, we can make it grow double digit, and that is good for peace. It's not a substitute.
Your critics say this. They say you say that you're willing to talk to the Palestinians without preconditions, but by refusing to freeze settlements on the West Bank, they say that that's a hollow promise, that you have basically stopped peace talks before they can begin. How do you respond to that?
This is an amazing claim. We've been talking to the Palestinians from 1993, which is, 16 years. Successive Israeli governments to successive Palestinian administrations. There's never been this precondition of freezing settlements ever put up. It's just been put up now artificially. Now, look, I'm willing to make gestures to help the peace process. How big a gesture? Well, we'll get there very soon, I suppose. But I'll tell you one thing I'm not willing to do. I can't freeze life. There are 250,000 people there in these communities, which are called settlements. They're really, most of them, bedroom suburbs of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. They need schools, they need kindergartens, they need health clinics. Mind you, the fate of the settlements will be determined in the negotiations, at the end of the negotiations, but you can't determine it before the negotiations. So I think the sooner we get off this obstacle and get down to the business of forging a real peace with the Palestinians recognizing the Jewish state of Israel and allowing for them a demilitarized state, that is a state in which they can govern themselves with all the powers they need, absent those that could threaten the state of Israel, I think that's the winning formula for peace.
Let me ask you about
demilitarized state that recognizes the Jewish state.
Does President Obama, blunt question, possess right now the clout and the power to move this process forward? Some have suggested that the weak economy in this country has weakened this president to the point where he has no clout.
Oh, I disagree. I think that any president of the United States wields clout. Don't sell short. The United States of America and its presidents, including President Obama. Of course he has clout. Of course he commands respect. I think also his speech in the to the Arab world was very important because many in the Arab world will say if President Obama supports this process, if he would support an outcome, a resolution that Mr. Abbas and myself would arrive at, that would have, I think, an important boost. It would give an important boost to a peace that we want. And I think we can achieve if we have on the other side a Sadat. You know, we got Sadat, we made peace. We got the late King Hussein, we made peace. I'll never forget how he came to the River Conference and from his deathbed, and he moved me to tears. We can make peace. Now, Mr. Abbas has to decide, Abu Mazen, the head of the Palestinian Authority, are you an Arafat or are you Sadat? If you're a Sadat, I will make peace with you.
Real quickly, I want to end, and I'm sorry to cut short the time, but on Iran, you said that Iran is weaker than people think. You are convinced they are attempting to build nuclear weapons, and you've said tougher sanctions are a way to prevent that. China and Russia have never been on board with those tougher sanctions. The president tried yesterday to talk to the Chinese about that. It's unclear if he made any progress. Absent China and Russia joining that move for tougher sanctions, if they continue to move down the road, Iran, and develop nuclear weapons, in your opinion, at what point do you go it alone? At what point do you strike?
I always say, Matt, that I don't deal in hypotheticals. Every country reserves the right to defend itself, and we're no exception. But Iran's acquisition or development of nuclear weapons is a threat to everyone. I mean, it's the major terrorist sponsoring state of our time, and it could give those nuclear weapons to terrorists or give them a nuclear umbrella which would bring terrorism beyond our wildest dreams to levels that are unimaginable. We just had a scare here in Manhattan. Just imagine terrorists with nuclear bombs. It makes this development so dangerous that it should not be merely Israel, but the entire world that unites to prevent this outcome. And let me say one thing. I don't know if they'll pass it through the UN, through the Security Council. But this is the time to act with what Hillary Clinton called crippling sanctions. And the Iranian regime is vulnerable. It's economically vulnerable. It's politically extremely vulnerable because, for a simple reason, the Iranian people hate it. They detest this medieval, backward regime that is gunning them down. As they lie choking in their blood on the sidewalks, protesting for freedom. This is the time to apply pressure against this criminal regime. And even if the UN Security Council can't get its act together, the leading powers of the day can put enormous pressure on Iran, especially when it comes to imported petroleum products, what we call in simple language, gasoline.
Mr. Prime Minister, it's good to have you in the studio. Good luck this week at the UN.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning.
Pleasure to see you. It's 11 minutes after the hour. Here's Meredith.
Matt, thank you. And now to our new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll and how people are viewing the president and his policies. Chuck Todd is NBC's political director and chief White House correspondent. Chuck, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Let's take a look at a few of these numbers, beginning with the president's approval rating, which has remained unchanged since last month, still at 51%. Meanwhile, Congress's approval rating plummeting 66%. Disapprove of the job that Congress is doing. And if health care reform were to fail, most people are not blaming the president, they're blaming Congress. So what do you read in these numbers?
This is a beating for all of Washington. All of Washington took a beating in this poll. You pointed out Congress's job rating. Speaker Pelosi has almost her record low, her own favorability rating record low. The Democratic Party as a whole went down. The Republican Party. It's as if the public is watching this debate in Washington and they're fed up. And so there's a building anti-Washington backlash. It's not necessarily, Democrats might pay a bigger price at the polls if this continues, but it's not as if Republicans are out of the woods. People even told us about their own member of Congress. 50% said they'd rather give somebody new a chance. Only 40% was ready to re-elect their current member. That tells you there's a growing sort of tide out there. And the question is, how long will it last?
But interestingly enough, not anti-Obama at this point.
Not yet. I mean, if the president, 51 isn't a great job approval rating, but it does make him the most popular politician in a town, frankly, that seems to be growing very unpopular with the entire country.
According to the poll, people are feeling better about the economy over the next 12 months, but not so good about the war in Afghanistan. Nearly 6 out of 10 are not confident that things will end well here.
And this is a potentially big political problem for the president, because when you look at the idea of sending more troops to Afghanistan, it's Republicans that are more supportive of that idea, not Democrats. So here you've got the president dealing with a tough political situation with health care, a tough political situation with the economy. Then all of a sudden, these are the problems. This is what makes being president hard. All of a sudden, you can't pick and choose your next issue. Afghanistan is now staring him in the face. And right now, Democrats aren't interested at all in sending more troops. So he may have to sit there and spend more time convincing his own party to support a policy that is not very popular.
And his chief military man in Afghanistan is saying we're going to need more troops.
It's clear that what the president seems to do, and everything I understand of what they're trying to do, is he's trying to create a new metric, a way to measure progress, so that whatever short-term troop increase they have, the idea is that they somehow hit their measurables so they can hurry up and pull people out.
All right, Chuck Todd, thank you very much.
All right, guys. Chuck, good to see you.
Nice
Let's
to see
go
you,
over to the
sir.
news desk right now. Ann standing by with the rest of the headlines of the morning. Ann, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt and Meredith. Good morning, everybody. Also news today, this morning, dramatic new images showing just how bad the flooding is in Georgia that we've been telling you about all this week. Even though floodwaters are starting to recede, entire neighborhoods are still underwater in some places. At least 9 deaths in Georgia are being blamed on this.
That's your latest weather. Matt?
All right, Al, thanks very much. He's one of the most controversial leaders attending the UN's General Assembly, Libya's Muammar Gaddafi. So where does someone like him stay during his first trip to the United States in 40 years? Well, not in the Tony suburb of Bedford like he'd planned. The town has put a stop to that. NBC's Jeff Rawson is there with details. Jeff, good morning to you.
Hey, Matt, good morning to you. When you travel for business, I'm sure you stay in hotels. I know I do. Most of us do, but not Muammar Gaddafi. He likes sleeping in tents. Tried to pitch one in Central Park. The city said no. He tried to pitch one in New Jersey. They said no. And so Gaddafi actually did pitch a tent, or at least started to, here in the small town of Bedford, New York, about an hour from the city, right on the estate of Donald Trump. And there's no welcome mat here either. Bedford, New York, home to mansions of the rich and famous, like Donald Trump and Martha Stewart, and now home to a tent of the powerful and infamous Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. His tent is so secluded you can only see it from the air. This is where Gaddafi may sleep this week while attending the UN General Assembly.
We don't want any terrorists anywhere near us. What the hell is he doing here? You know, it just doesn't make any sense.
Neighbors and local officials complained, but his tent is on private property owned by Donald Trump. This is Gaddafi's first time on U.S. soil in 40 years, and the timing couldn't be more controversial. Gaddafi angered U.S. officials recently, celebrating the release of Pan Am 103 bomber Abdel Basset Ali al-Megrahi. So Americans haven't exactly rolled out the red carpet for his UN visit. Gaddafi originally planned to pitch his tent in Englewood, New Jersey, on property owned by the Libyan embassy. But neighbors, even New Jersey's governor, fought back.
Mr. Gaddafi is not welcome in New Jersey.
Gaddafi backed out. He made the same request to pitch a tent in New York's Central Park. That request was denied. It seems bizarre, a world leader, the man Ronald Reagan once called the mad dog of the Middle East, preferring tents over glamour. Turns out Muammar Gaddafi hates elevators and reportedly refuses to ride in them, ruling out many of New York's high-rise hotels. So wherever he goes, he brings the Bedouin-style tent. From Paris to Rome, Belgium to Tripoli, the tent follows Gaddafi everywhere. Which brings us back to the posh town of Bedford and the tent on Donald Trump's property. In a statement to NBC News, the Trump Organization said, "We have business partners and associates all over the world. The property was leased on a short-term basis to Middle Eastern partners who may or may not have a relationship to Mr. Gaddafi. We are looking into the matter." Late yesterday, just as Libyan workers were putting the satellite dishes on top of the tent, city officials from here in Bedford walked in with a stop work order. Turns out, Matt, they don't have the proper permits to build that tent, so it won't happen here. There are reports that Gaddafi is staying at the Libyan mission in Midtown Manhattan near the UN. Gaddafi speaks to the UN later today.
All right, Jeff Rawson in Bedford, New York for us this morning. Jeff, thank you very much. It's 20 minutes after the hour. Once again, here's Meredith.
Matt, thank you. And now to the potential legal trouble for former Senator and presidential candidate John Edwards, following his admitted affair with a former campaign worker. And it comes just days after a New York Times report that Edwards may be ready to admit that he is the father of the woman's 19-month-old daughter. NBC's senior investigative correspondent Lisa Myers has the latest. Good morning to you, Lisa.
Good morning, Meredith. A federal grand jury in North Carolina is now investigating whether tens of thousands of dollars in payments by Edwards' campaign donors used to help his former mistress were hush money, whether Edwards knew, and whether any of it was a crime.
Hey, man. Good to see you.
What was once merely a sordid tale of a politician's infidelity and serial untruthfulness now is playing out inside this North Carolina courthouse with potentially serious legal consequences. Rielle Hunter, a campaign videographer with whom Edwards now admits having an affair, brought her 19-month-old daughter when she testified before the grand jury last month. How much legal trouble might Edwards be in? Stephen Salzberg is a former federal prosecutor.
I think he's in substantial trouble because I think the hush money
looks bad, smells bad, and the grand jury seems to be serious.
At issue was the $114,000 paid by Edwards' campaign to Hunter for legitimate work, or was some of it to keep her quiet? Also at issue was money from two big campaign donors, which was used to move Hunter, pay her rent, and pay other costs, actually hush money. Prosecutors are considering what would be a novel legal theory, that money to keep an affair quiet and maintain Edwards' viability as a candidate amounted to campaign contributions, which Edwards should have reported. One former prosecutor thinks it's a stretch.
As far as a criminal case goes, I consider it pretty far-fetched.
Edwards has denied any knowledge of the payments.
I know absolutely nothing about this.
Edwards also first denied the affair.
The story's false. It's completely untrue. It's ridiculous.
Then admitted the affair, but denied he fathered the child.
I know that it's not possible that this child could be mine.
Now, those close to him say he's considering declaring that he is the child's father. Back in May, his wife Elizabeth, who is battling breast cancer, was asked by Matt about the possibility Edwards is the father.
I wish for it to never be an issue, but if it becomes an issue, that's just another thing to deal with, but that's not like a further betrayal that I need to deal with.
Neither Edwards' lawyer nor his spokesman returned calls about the grand jury proceedings. Edwards has denied wrongdoing and says all campaign funds were used properly. Meredith.
All right, Lisa Myers, thank you very much. And just ahead, the genetic parents of the embryo implanted in the wrong woman during an IVF procedure. They're going to speak out for the first time in an exclusive live interview. But first, this is Today on NBC.